Welcome to the Smith Publicity All Things Book Marketing Podcast, offering tips, insights, and advice from the best in the publishing industry.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of All Things Book Marketing. I'm your host, Olivia McCoy, and our special guest today is Maria Rosati, the founder and CEO of Eminence Communications. Eminence is a boutique integrated marketing agency focused on building brands that stand apart. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Olivia. Thank you for having me on today. I'm very excited about our conversation.
Me too. I am really excited about this conversation. We get to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is the intersection of book promotion and all three segments, but getting ahead of myself. So let's...
I hope our listeners are as excited as we are about this topic.
Oh, I'm sure that they are. Let's start by having you tell us more about your work and how you help authors.
Sure. So I'm going to give a little, I'm going to step back a little bit and just go into my background because I think it's very interesting for this conversation. So I started my career on the PR agency side, and then the other half I was in-house. But what really happened that brought me to where I am today is in 2008, I was working for a global asset manager. And as we know, it was the brink of the recession. And more and more outlets were dropping coverage of asset management. There were protests on Wall Street. And I was like, wow, how are we ever going to get positive coverage out there? And then I had an aha moment. And I'm like, wait a minute. At the same time, all the trade publications were losing ad revenue and everything was going digital and their print publications were downsizing. And I'm like, wait, they need revenue and we need eyeballs. And so I started talking to one of the trade publication editors, and we created events together that they would audio and visually film and then push it out to their readers. So we would get the viewership and, you know, it would expand our reach. And at that time, we did not have a digitally savvy website, so we had no capability to capture leads. So it was perfect. They could capture the leads and give us the names. So, and that's when I said, wait a minute, this whole equation of PR and marketing has changed. And this is going to be a big part of our conversation today. But PR and marketing used to be separate functions. And now in a digital world, it all revolves around content and telling a compelling story, which is very much like writing a book. It's telling a compelling story, relating to your target audience. And so it's the same philosophy. And PR now is just a channel. And I'm going to get into our conversation later, the difference between when you want to use PR versus marketing versus branding and how they all intersect.
Yes. And so I've actually heard of those three categories defined in two separate ways. I've heard marketing, PR, and branding, but I've also heard earned, owned, and paid media. And so which way do you refer to them as? What's the vocabulary you use?
So earned, owned, and paid media, I think, is very outdated. So, in a digital world, what changed is brands can now control the message. In the old days, when I started, and I'm not going to say what year, in PR on the agency side, the only way to get outside promotion of what you were doing was through PR. But now in a digital world, you can have a blog, you can publish on social media, you can have a newsletter, you can have an email campaign, and all these are SEO optimized. So in a search, someone can find your content. So that's really how the whole equation changed. And so the paid, earned, owned is just a way to, it's again, marketing, it's content, and it's marketing meeting PR. And again, they each have their own function. So I just think that's an outdated term.
Fair enough. No, that's great. That's some of the terminology I was taught, but then I was kind of taught it in conjunction with paid being marketing, earned being publicity, and owned being branding. But I can see how that would kind of not necessarily work within the confines of how we function today in the digital age.
Well, you made a very good point, because what's interesting and how I distinguish myself from other marketers is because I started out on the PR side. I really understand the editorial side, and I understood when they started doing paid editorial. And as a matter of fact, when I left my corporate job, I worked for some industry magazines, helping them design content ideas for monetization, because I knew what the other end was consuming, or what was easy to push out. So so most marketers have a hard time understanding PR, but PR folks have an easier time understanding marketing and adopting marketing. So I would like to say that's where I'm a little different, because I get how they all work together.
Yeah, I actually flip-flopped the beginning of my career. I started in marketing and then went over to PR here at Smith.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. And do you have any takeaways from our conversation, what I just said, that, I'd love
No,
to hear your.
I
Mhm.
think that's true. I feel like I don't know. I feel like there isn't a lot of nuance with marketing. There's a lot of figuring out timing is really important. It's the same for publicity. I think they are two sides of the same coin in a certain sense, and they do work so tangentially, so closely related.
I
It's
will tell
interesting.
you,
Yeah.
the biggest thing I discovered, and the biggest takeaway, is that PR rarely leads to sales, and it rarely leads to bringing money in the door. And I know there are some people that will fight me on it, but in the old days when I was in PR corporate communications, I worked for a private bank, and we would take out these big advertorials in trade publications, and we put a 1-800 number on it. Nobody ever called the 1-800 number. And in my last role at a global asset manager, we had portfolio managers on CNBC, on Bloomberg TV, quoted in the Wall Street Journal, quoted in Barron's, and never led to an asset coming in the door, or couldn't be directly tracked. Where marketing really does help that, because you can see how it adds, because really, the end of the day, what marketing does, it helps build your email list and your target audience, which for an author or for any brand is your currency. So that way you can track the leads that come in, what ones lead to sales. And so through marketing, you can really track it. And so that's really the one of the main defining lines between the two.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. And I'm not going to argue that publicity is not necessarily a sales booster. It's more of an impressions booster to help garner, or not garner, inform potential sales, as well as build up the brand. I always felt like it was kind of a rock, paper, scissors, where publicity helped boost your brand and credibility, and your brand was the base of your marketing that helped inform sales and make those connections, long-lasting leads, and marketing was what got them then through the door, making that purchasing decision, and then it all kind of lead back into each other.
So I think very similar. So the way I say it now, and I used to call it, even now when I work with clients, I call it the whole brand element is the surround sound, right? So the central core is your brand, and how do you amplify your brand, and also what goes into a brand. So amplifying it is, so it's creating good thought leadership, and then pushing it out through social media, pushing it out through PR opportunities, paid and unpaid. Having a YouTube video channel where you record videos. But those are all channels, and they all have to be firing at once. And if you're just using one channel, then you're limiting yourself. So that's the surround sound of you're hearing it, through different modes and channels where you consume content. And then that's how something goes viral. And the other thing I would say is in the old days, if I got someone on the Today Show, let's say, their product could go viral and it could lead to a huge bump in sales, let's say Spanx. They were never a client of mine, but something like that. But now, this, I'm Gen X, anything below Gen X, do they even watch the Today Show? And I'm Gen X and I don't watch the Today Show. And I'm not knocking the Today Show, but our avenues of communication have gotten bifurcated. So, a lot of people are consuming content on TikTok, YouTube. A lot of people now don't even have cable TV, they stream. So to reach someone, it's not as easy, where in the old days you had 3 avenues. So it was also a lot easier to track. So that's really where you're also going to start this whole equation of who's your audience, where are they consuming information, where do you need to play, and then I call it the ROI. So the reason I like marketing and communications as opposed to chemistry is exact. Our science is a liberal art and it is not exact. So you try it. And when I say try it, it's like launching a podcast. You don't give up after 5 episodes. Maybe it's 3 years worth and you say, okay, what's the ROI? But it takes time to build traction, grow an audience. So it's things you don't give up on, but you start to see for the time commitment, what's the return and how is that helping our business? And so that's what I do with my clients. I go channel by channel. And the last thing I will say is I work with a lot of smaller clients, as are authors. They're not a huge brand with robust marketing budgets. So we usually look at activating the top 2 to 3 channels where their audience is consuming content, determine the ROI, which ones we should continue, which ones we shouldn't, and then what ones we should add in. And so that's a way to maximize efficiency.
I love that. And I love the idea, the visualization of the surround sound. So I'd love to get into that a little bit more. Let's start at the core, start at branding. What are some of those essential brand assets that every author should have at their core?
Yeah. So, people, even before I got on the podcast, I Googled what is a brand. So it's very interesting of what comes up. And, the old nomenclature was it was just visual. But what a lot of people don't realize, your brand goes way beyond that. And, for authors, but even more, let's say, your consumer brand, PepsiCo. And my biggest frustration in the corporate world was that your biggest brand ambassadors are your employees, current, former, and potential. And if you're not treating your current ones well, they're not going to proselytize for your brand. So there's a lot of touch points, and people, we saw in COVID that internal comms has really stepped to the forefront because it is a crucial part of your brand. But it's what you're saying. Are you actually doing what you're saying? How are you treating employees? Are your brand colors and your positioning all aligned? Is there a common thread? Also, are you consistent in your messaging so someone knows immediately that's Pepsi or that, and so there's so many touch points that are the visual with the written, and the story is more and more at the forefront. And again, it goes to content is the center of your brand. And then there's the channels, and that's the surround sound.
So then what are some of the first steps authors should take in amplifying those assets, that content that they have in their core?
Yep. So I would say, from working with numerous authors, what is it? Field of Dreams. I will build it and therefore they will come. So a lot of them, and again, they're writing and this is their baby. They're putting so much brain power into it that they don't really think about the marketing equation, and they see it as, okay, I wrote my book, I'm done. It's not, I write my book, I'm done. That's actually the beginning, which most people don't realize. And the beginning starts with, first figuring out, how are you going to publish this? Self-published, hybrid, or a publishing house? Because some will give you some help, others you're on your own. But so that's the first step. The second step is, I need a website, because your website is where you house all your content. So that's where people are going to come to learn more about you, hear about your background, potentially, be able to schedule meetings with you, book you as a speaker, learn more other thoughts, other things that you're writing, and just that's your home and your repository. So that is first and foremost. And again, what are the colors you're using? Does it align? Does it look very homespun? You don't want it to look homespun. So don't give it to your nephew who's a sophomore in college studying, coding. Make sure someone who understands branding takes a look at it and it all ties in and is reflective of who you are. So first and foremost is your website.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm hearing, it does sound like a story as you're talking about it. You have creation first with content, and then one ring out, you have discoverability and building your site. And so now you're starting to really make the setting. You have the storyline, you have the themes, but now you have a setting where people can come and discover it. How do they then go out and spread their reach, so to speak, spread their wings and share their content with the rest of the world too?
Yep. And you're spot on with your assessment. And so the third lever is amplification. And so, there's a lot of things. And what I've discovered is working with authors, again, they, program that I finished my book, I'm done. And in the website is the housing of it, but then I start to ask questions when it comes to the amplification that uncover a larger platform, which could be a 5-year roadmap and leads to increased monetization. So I'll give you an example and then I'll get into amplification. But, do you want to be a consultant? Do you want to start going to organizations and talking about your thoughts and what the book is about? Do you want to create workshops? What is the next extension of your book? And a lot of them haven't even thought beyond, again, the book. So I help them think that through and what their capacity is and how they can build it out and the steps that need to be taken. And then once we have that mapped out, then we say, okay, what are the next steps? So a newsletter. I always recommend a newsletter because, again, that's one of the best ways to build your currency. So a newsletter leads to emails, and that's how you build your currency, because that's your audience, that's your community. And all of this is about building a community, because the more you have a community and the tighter the community is, they are your brand ambassadors. They're your employees because you're not a company. And so they're the ones that are going to be out there proselytizing for you or recommending your book or waiting for your book and booking you to speak. And so, so it all starts with, I say, newsletter. And a lot of people say, oh my God, a newsletter. It's not that hard, and I know Smith Sandy helps a lot of clients think through these issues as well. And, it could be 3 things: an article, a thought from you, and 2 recommended reading, and a podcast, something as simple as that, or it can get more complicated. Also, LinkedIn allows you to create a newsletter. The downside of LinkedIn is people can sign up. You cannot get their emails, but you can see who's signed up. But it's a good way to start to build the community and then eventually take it outside of LinkedIn and let people sign up. And those that want to follow you will sign up. And then you start to build your email list. So that is, I would say, first and foremost is a newsletter. And again, then you can keep adding new content and thought leadership to your website, which is where people are going to get directed back to at the end of the day. So it all starts to work together.
How can authors utilize their community and their networks once they've built it up with that newsletter and that website and all that content?
Yeah. So I would tell everyone, and there's been some articles, but there was even news today that one of the best marketers on the planet is someone named Taylor Swift. And why? Yes. I am not a Swiftie, but I love her tenacity, the fact that, she's relatively young, but she's controlling her brand. She does not have a lot of outside consultants. She calls the shots. But what she is an expert in is building a community. So, her fans, as we saw, they add to the economy when, whatever city she's in, because they're flying in from out of town. But what she is doing is she's building this community. So they're waiting for her next album to drop. That's why her sales, the minute she drops a song, go to the top of the charts, because you've already created a community that wants to see what's next. So that's the importance of community. But also, how did Taylor build that community? Because she listens. So, and that is the problem with corporate America, is they don't listen. And again, they don't realize their biggest advocates and their biggest enemies are their employees, past employees. And so the more you listen to them and know that you heard them and give them what you want, the more and tighter the community is going to become. So, I encourage working with your marketing team to create interactive dialogue. Maybe, it's a regular monthly webinar with some Q&A or whatever. And again, find the ROI and keep tweaking the formula. But that is how you build a tight community that will be with you thick and thin. And I will have to say, another newsworthy person is our former president. I will not mention his name, but, it's just incredible that no matter what happens, he has a loyal following. And I don't think he listens to his base, but it just is testament to the power of a community and what it can do to build a brand on the plus side and on the negative side.
Thank you so much for all of this. It's been really informative. How can our listeners and watchers learn more about you and get in touch?
Sure. I'd love it if people would get in touch with me. Again, be interactive. I love answering questions. I love mentoring people. So my email is mrosati, ROS as in Sam, T as in Tom, I, at eminenceny.com. And my website is eminenceny.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn. And it was such a pleasure, Olivia. Thank you. Great questions. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. And listeners, watchers, if you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and share it with anyone else that might be interested. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Smith Publicity All Things Book Marketing Podcast. To reach us and learn about our many services, visit smithpublicity.com or send us an email to info@smithpublicity.com.